As you know, on Sunday night or Monday morning of every week, we post a new expository semiotics explaining why we would choose which lectionary readings. But in these readings, our dream is, and our desire is, to help you read the signs and fondle the details and spot the seminal metaphors, the condensed signs and the stories that are key for preaching to a digital culture. So strap on your seatbelt and join us as we prospect our passages for today. I'm so glad that you've joined me today for LenTalk number 150. And I'm excited to look at these lectionary passages and to give kind of a semiotic spin on one of them in particular, and that is the gospel reading for today. And it is the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 13 to 20. And it begins with this phrase that we just taken for granted, but Jesus actually coined it and reframed it in a positive, not a negative light. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But you are the salt of the earth. We talk about salt of the earth people. Here's where it comes from. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father. Notice it's not give glory to you, but it's give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Now, I just want to do a little kind of semiotics, just some semiotics of light and salt. And we're going to end by trying to bring the two together. You are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. We are to be salt of the earth, light of the world people. What does that mean? And what are these metaphors that Jesus is using? Light and salt. Now, light is a very ancient one. God's primal decree is light. God called creation into being with the words, you all know them, let there be light. Actually, I think that was a song. God sang the world, let there be light, into being rather than said it, but that's a whole other story. But the light of the world was called into creation with the words, let it be, let there be, let be. This is, the importance of light is kind of universal among ancient people. Obelisks, for example, you see these obelisks, like this Washington Monument is an obelisk. But obelisks in ancient thinking represented the first beam of light which set off creation. And especially among the Egyptians, they were, in a sense, turning the Big Bang into stone, if you will. And they were set up normally in pairs, and by the ceremonial entrance to ancient temples, a place where the sun could be imagined as rising between them. And so all of these just kind of freestanding obelisks have a pattern and a significance. Let be the light. First decree, the primal decree. And the primary decree of Jesus is let be the love. Let be the light. Let be the love. And the soul hungers, every soul hungers, your soul and mine, for two things, light and love. To hunger and thirst after righteousness is to yearn for light and love. Because without the light, you can't grow. You need the light to grow and to fully be. Now, Jesus is the very definition of both. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is the world's greatest lover. So light and love find their completion and fulfillment in him. And this passage here in Matthew goes on to talk about the Torah, the law being fulfilled in Jesus, who himself is embodied Torah. Jesus is embodied Torah and embedded temple. And at Mount Hermon or Mount Tabor, depending on what school of thought you subscribe to about the transfiguration, Jesus himself is transfigured into a massive light of love. And this was witnessed by the two cousins, John and James, and their friend Peter. If Jesus is the light of the world and the world's greatest lover, then the one question for the church will always be, how well do we light things up? And how well do we love one another? The two questions of the church, from the very beginning to the end. How well do we light things up? Especially light up Christ. And how well do we love each other? Notice we're called to be the light of the world. We're not called to be the groan of the world. We are not called to be the moan of the world. We are called to be the light and love of the world. Live as children of light, Paul says in Ephesians 5:8. While you have the light, trust in the light that you may become sons and daughters of the light. That's John 12:36. So the symbolism of light here, especially for Jesus, is huge. Now, there's one other thing that I want you to think about every time you trim a wick. An untrimmed wick can give off more stultifying smoke than illuminating light. When's the last time you trimmed your wick? Made your candle smaller so that it can burn brighter and cleaner. This is a candle, but if I let it burn without trimming the wick, it will start smoking, and actually the flame itself would get dimmer and diminish. A clean cut wick is a more stable flame. Far less smoke and soot, a longer burning candle. And the greatest teacher greatest teacher of wick trimming is John the Baptist. And every time you trim a wick of a candle, there's a little mantra, and I try and say it myself when I trim wicks. I got these special scissors that trim wick, so you can go way down deep and trim it without getting your hands burnt to a crisp. John said in Luke 3:16, as he's talking about the one who is coming, he must become greater, I must become less. That's John, I think it's 3:20, and it follows the 3:16 passage. He must become greater, I must become less. You trim the wick and make it smaller so that the light can burn longer and faster. We are the wicks. Jesus is the light. When we make ourselves less in humility, we become less. And not, look at me, look at me, look at me. But when we become less in humble obedience and servanthood, then the light of Christ burns brighter and longer. We become less, that he may become greater. Notice too, and Thomas Jefferson, I think, was the first one to put this in kind of proverbial form, that anyone who lights his taper at my light doesn't darken mine as he receives that light. In other words, the essence of light is to give itself away without diminishing itself, without diminishing the light. And so I could spend the next 10 minutes here just taking just kind of various tapers and lighting the tapers from this one light, and it's still going to be strong and vibrant So the idea that and I've learned this over the years about sermons. I'm producing something every week. I have since I was 25 years old. I've written a sermon a week and published a sermon a week, and in some form or another. But I was first tempted to save the best for myself. Oh, I got to save the best for myself, and just kind of hoard what I thought was the best, and give away kind of the cuttings on the floor. And I realized that the more I did that, the worse it got, and the more clogged my creativity. And when I gave the best away every week, and so I'm giving you the best I got at this moment about salt and light. But when I give the best away, at that moment, my candle actually burns as strong, if not brighter, and I get new inspiration and new ideas and new shower kind of epiphanies. So this is the whole essence here of light. And why do you put a light on a lampstand? Why did Jesus tell parables? For the same reason you put a lamp on a lampstand. You put a lamp on a stand to make the light go further, so people can see it better. And that's what we do in our preaching. We are putting the light on a stand so that others can see it better and make the light go further. The light of the world. Now, I don't want to get on a riff here, okay? And I don't want to get on a rant here, but the light of the world is not a fluorescent light or an LED light. And the problem with both of these, and I don't like either. I mean, everything wrong. I wrote a whole essay once on everything wrong with the modern world you can find in a fluorescent light. It bathes everything in the same color. It doesn't allow for any kind of shade or chiaroscuro or what the Japanese call maigakure, which means kind of shading, and it has a kind of hide and reveal quality to it. It just bathes everything in this blue, depressing, oppressing, sucking the energy out of you light. It is not that kind of a light. It is an incandescent, if you will, till we find something better. An incandescent, incarnational light that it doesn't, as both fluorescents and LEDs flash 100 times a second, or 300 times, or whatever it is, and just gives you headaches and some people depression. My responsibility and yours is, as the Bible puts it, to walk in the light as he is in the light, and to seek first God's kingdom and righteousness. The rest is on Jesus. We walk in the light, and the light that illumines our path, and what happens after walking in the light and living out of the light and seeking first the light of God's kingdom and righteousness. That's our mission. And whether we are deemed successful at it in the eyes of the world or a failure in the eyes of the world, doesn't matter. That's your job and mine, is to walk in the light that has been given to us, and to seek the light of God's kingdom and righteousness. The rest is on Jesus. You are the light of the world, Matthew 5:14. A light doesn't draw attention to itself. A light doesn't light up the light. A light shines on something else so it can be seen. And a light illumines our path. And this is the context of Jesus' next statement. So let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Praise your Father, not praise you. This is the light of mine. I'm going to let it shine. It doesn't shine on you. It doesn't light you up. It's meant to shine Jesus. It shines Jesus and lights him up. Let your life so shine that people will see Jesus in you and want a relationship with the true light of the world. It's not you. The light doesn't shine to shine light on itself, but on the light of the world. Now, salt. Jesus mixes these metaphors. He's a master of mixed metaphors. I always thought, never mix your metaphors. Jesus mixes metaphors all the time. So we got light, and then we got salt. You are the salt of the earth. Now, the light of the world, salt of the earth. What is salt? And what's this metaphor of salt? And we could spend a lot of time. I just want to do a brief semiotics here. Two of the most important chemicals in our bodies that our bodies consume is water, H2O, and salt, NaCl, sodium chloride. Now, here's the thing to understand the semiotics of salt. Salt is a mineral. Salt is not a condiment. Salt is not a spice. Salt is not a seasoning. Salt is not a flavoring. Salt is a mineral. It's a mineral that brings out the flavor of what's inside and what it's salting. If you don't use too much of it. If you use too much of it, it tastes the mineral. But the function of salt is not to add a certain flavor or taste or spice or season. No, the purpose of salt is to bring out, enhance the inner essence of what it is. It is salting. And light and salt may seem quite different things, but they have this in common. Light is invisible in itself, but becomes visible by the things it illumines. And salt does not so much have flavor, but brings out the flavor of other things. So light has to be the light of something, and salt has to be the salt of something. So this is why our Lord speaks of the salt of the earth and the light of the world. In other words, the reality in which we live. But you and I are not the light. You and I are not the salt. We're not the flavor. We are meant to help to bring out the flavor, to light up the light, to salt the taste, to bring out the taste of what is actually being salted. And we also need some kind of awareness of how weird this sounded when Jesus gave it, because in the ancient world, salt was a negative by and large, and Jesus coins this meme. You're the salt of the earth, and we talk about salt of the earth people meaning good and kind, but salt, it was usually a negative. I mean, think of Lot's wife. Wept for her children, for what she was leaving behind so hard. There flowed a river of tears. And what's the main ingredient in tears? It's a mineral called salt that she turned herself. Basically, she cried herself to death, and it was symbolized in this. She became a pillar of tears. She just cried, a pillar of salt. She just cried so much, and so much salt came out. Here's this pillar. She cried herself to death. She became this pillar of salt. In the Middle Ages, salt was spread on land to poison it. It is a punishment for landowners who had transgressed against society in some way. So Jesus is taking a negative, and this is a culture, Mediterranean culture, sea, salt, Dead Sea, salt, negative, and making it a positive and esteeming its value. And we fail to appreciate how significant that is. Covenant of salt. All right, a covenant. Now, a covenant is something you always cut. So you have this covenant of salt phrase used 3 times in the Bible. What is going on here? And most commentaries that you read, they will tell you, well, you get the standard. Well, salt is used as a preservative. It's a preserving agent. And so followers of Jesus are the salt of the earth because they help slow down the decline and the decay and the degeneration of a culture. And salt preserves what it sinks into from rotting and stinking and decomposing. And And that's what we do to the planet. That's what we do when we're functioning properly. I don't think that's it at all. I mean, there may be some of that, a little bit. But if you understand the concept of the covenant of salt, it's pointing in a whole different direction. And it's not a pleasant direction to go in. And that's why people don't want to go into it. The immediate context of Jesus' salt of the earth statement is being persecuted for righteousness. Last week, we listened to Jesus on a mountainside giving his equivalent of the Ten Commandments, which Moses gave on Mount Sinai. Jesus gives the 8 Beatitudes, but one of them, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness. And so in the Beatitudes, you get the good, the bad, and the ugly. You get it all. You get the good blessings, and then you get the blessings that kind of seem as ugly blessings, but they are blessings too. And if you live for Jesus as the salt of the earth, you should expect to get, and this is a Jesus phrase, salted by fire. You will be salted by fire. In other words, the fire of persecution, hostility, even hatred, and martyrdom will salt you, your life, and will bring out what's really there. And what is really there? Is it faithfulness? I mean, are you following Jesus for the loaves and fishes? Or are you following Jesus because he is the way, the truth, and the life? So if you live for Jesus as the salt of the earth, you should expect to be insulted and falsely accused and maligned and mocked. And Jesus is telling his followers here the cost of following him. There is a cost to, and that's part of what it means to be the salt of the earth. There's a cost. And you have Luke 14, 34 to 35, again using salt in the context of counting the cost of being his disciple. And after talking about and calculating the cost of building a tower and going to war, he states that once salt loses its saltiness, it's not good for anything, even for fertilizer. It has no value whatsoever. So he tells his listeners to listen up. You want to live for me? You want to walk with me? You want to walk the way? It's not a walk in the park. And so think about this before you begin your journey. And then we have Mark 9, 42 to 50. Jesus goes beyond counting the cost to what it means to live for him. And the essence here, we're to live in such a way that our lives will affect others positively. And then that's when this phrase comes. But everyone, even then, even when you're making a positive impact, you better expect to be salted with fire. Everyone will be salted with fire. Do you trust God enough? Will you trust God enough? Even in those times of trials and tribulations, temptations, will you trust God enough to stay faithful to the course? Will your true colors, your true flavors, or the true character of Christ remain with you? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another in Mark 9. Being at peace with one another is a sign of your saltiness. We got 3 distinguishing signs of saltiness. 1, you love each other. 1, you live changed lives. And 3rd, you live in peace and unity. And this is Paul's note in Colossians. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt. Now here, we're really talking about a metaphor. It's not a kind of built on the reality of salt. And salt here kind of means wit and levity. So you know how to give an answer to everyone. In other words, as you share the gospel, especially with those who are doubters or disbelievers, will you be full of grace, full of kindness, full of humility, full of wit? I mean, kind of levity. In the midst of all this gravity, will you have some levity? It's not cleverness. It's not eloquence. It's lightness of being. and the kindness of Christ. I have done 2 church plants in my life, and I've been kind of tempted at times to consider doing a third. But the question becomes, okay, what would you name it? What would you name your church? And I just looked up the 12 most popular church names in America today. And let me give you number 1, First Baptist. 5,115 churches named First Baptist. Number 2, First United Methodist. Okay, 2,149 of those. Number 4, First Presbyterian. Number 7, First Christian. Number 12, First Assemblies of God. So over half of the top 12 most popular church names in America are first. We want to be first. We are so proud we got there first. But this is theologically incorrect, because Jesus said the first will be last and the last will be first. So have you ever heard of a last Baptist church? There's not one. How about a last Methodist church? How about a last Presbyterian church? How about a last Assembly church? Okay. So I was tempted, if I've ever done church, I would just call it the last church or something. And since I just wrote a book with Glenn Wilson on T-logs, the last, the end. But I really, the one that I think I would pick, one of the church plants, it was a combination church plant and merger, and it was in Geneseo, New York, and in Piffard, New York, is a massive salt mine, and we just called it Geneseo United Methodist Church. But I missed an opportunity. What was I thinking? I could have called it Salt Mine. Just that, Salt Mine. How's that for the name of the church? And then the people who come there, don't call them members, call them miners. And what does it mean that we are to mine the salt that will bring out the flavors of every human? What is the essence of your humanity? We're going to salt it and bring it out. And even while we're doing it, we know we're going to get salted by fire. There's going to be people who are going to oppose us, even for such a stupid name for a church. Salt mine. Call them miners. And what about giving them miners helmets as did you bring your miner's helmet this morning with the carbide lamps? And so we end by bringing the 2 images together. Salt and light. Salt mine. Salt of the earth. The lamp. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Jesus is the light of the world. And that's what we're looking for. Ultimately, Jesus, who is the light of the world, and we work and play in the salt mines.